Yes, for a long time. It seemed like a long time. You know,
You don't mind if I record?
no, please
Okay.
do.
Yeah, so I do have a little bit basic understanding of these, but maybe if you could walk through, probably for the 100th time this weekend, like what makes this a little bit special? I know you have a lot of experience with TAD and then ELAC and budget, cost no object. What were you trying to accomplish here?
So I was only really given two briefs,
Okay.
wishes, let's say, when I joined MoFi. And the thing about MoFi is I've moved to a company that is not a speaker manufacturer.
Okay.
So there's nothing to fit into or a pattern to follow.
Right.
And they hired me because they like what I do. So let me do what I do is the
That's
concept
easy.
behind it.
Okay.
Right? It can be scary because what do I do? I've got all the ideas that you have floating around.
Okay.
But they said, we like good, impactful bass. Yeah, you can go with that. And then the other sort of brief was, we're experiencing a mid-century modern revival right now, both in interior design, but all speakers, the JBL 100s and the Lintons and all of these speakers. So that would be a good area to look at. And that's good because it was always big woofers. Well, that fits in with, we like good, impactful bass. And I thought that'd be fun to play around with big woofers. So if we've decided on that, there's a whole lot more to a speaker than a big woofer. So I've always been known for doing the concentric drivers. So I'm thinking, okay, so do I do a concentric driver with the big woofer? And the reason I've always done three-way concentric drivers is because I've always said I'd never do a two-way concentric. So clearly I lied.
Yeah. Now, yeah.
But and the reason for that is you don't want the cone moving much around the tweeter because that can introduce modulation distortions and the shape of the surround you need.
That's true.
Disrupts things. So the quickest way of removing excursion is to remove bass. So you make it into a three-way, you cross over a couple of hundred hertz, now there's no sound. But now you're adding complication and extra drivers and cost, and the network gets very complex to passively cross over at those low frequencies. Lots of interaction with the driver impedance. So thinking it through, well, the other way to remove excursion is to substitute area, since bass is the product of area times excursion. And we've already said the idea of using a 10-inch bass driver. So why don't I just do a two-way concentric 10-inch?
With a 10-inch.
Right? So once we kind of lodged that idea in my brain, it's kind of, never done it before, but I like challenges, and it'd be kind of partly what I've always done, and then surprise. So that's the path
Okay.
I went down. The problem is nothing existed. It's not as if I can just grab the parts.
That's true. Yeah.
So, and also what cone materials.
Right.
So I'm a long time thinking through how I actually implement this and looking to see, can I find an example of a 10-inch mid-bass driver that would go up high enough and smooth enough for what I need to do? If I can find just one example, it proves it's possible. Doesn't prove that I can do it,
Right.
but it proves someone did it. So that was the search I was doing. And there's not many examples in home audio that have that approach, 10-inch mid-bass. Zoo Audio do things like that.
That's true. Yeah.
And I thought Pro Audio, and Tannoy have been doing it for years. But that's not the best example for what I'm looking for, because they use compression drivers, and those go down lower than typical tweeters, so they can cross a bit lower. I need a woofer that smoothly goes out to about 3K, so I can cross over 1.5, or 1.6 in this case. But I found an example of published curves of some 10-inch mid-bass driver that seemed to do the job. So I bought it, so I could make my own measurements. And okay, it did it, but the voice coil size is too small and the surround isn't what I want, but there's potential there. And okay, so I got to design my own cone and get it tooled, and I've got to design my own surround and get it tooled, and I got to do my own voice coils and a tweeter that fits down the middle that can go down to 1.6K, and then the magnet system that I've got to do to fit everything inside the voice coil. So it became everything needs tooling before I can even put anything together and verify that this will work. And tooling costs money and time. So, well, I've got to try it. And so it was this long period of getting all of that sorted and parts made. And then finally I get my drive unit. And so I can measure it, develop a crossover. And it's make or break time. You know, it either works or I go, oh, what do I do now?
Start from scratch again.
But when I listened to it, there was this character to the sound that this is really interesting. This is going to work. And yeah, I did a few more tweaks, but the promise was there of this is going to be an interesting direction for me. And that's what this became. But in particular with the magnet circuit, when you're trying to cram everything down the middle of the voice coil, you don't have much room for all the magnets. And often you don't get so much flux in the tweeter gap, so it's not as high efficiency as I might like. But I've found a way of coupling all the magnets together. Difficult to assemble because you have to pre-magnetize before you assemble, which factories hate. And normally you make it all and then you stick the whole driver into a magnetizer, bang, and there's... But if you've got magnets that need doing in reverse directions, you cannot do that. And you're trying to force them together and they don't want to go, but you're working in a very narrow gap and very difficult. I came up with this design that did what I want and couples all the fluxes together. So we called it Twin Drive.
Okay.
And that's part of play on words because I'm identical twin.
Okay.
So I thought, yeah, that works.
Cool.
And anyway, so a lot of work went into that. But the advantage of this magnet assembly, it's very low modulation distortion. There's all sorts of distortion mechanisms in a drive unit. And I wanted to try and minimize those because when you're working with a cone like this, breakup modes are about 3K-ish. And even though you might use a crossover steep enough to think you're out of trouble, the distortion mechanisms come after the crossover. And so those harmonics couple straight into the cone. So I wanted to minimize that. But that's what we end up with. And then to minimize diffraction from the cabinet.
Yeah, this baffle is interesting.
Yeah, so...
Kind of angles.
So there's... The best way to minimize diffraction is to curve the cabinet backwards away from the drive unit. And you can do that with a continuous curve. I did that with the TAD speakers. And Kef do it with the LS50. You've seen the shape of that. So as long as it curves backwards before you meet the edges, diffraction is reduced. Well, the other is sort of a piecewise approximation to that, faceting the baffle. Avalon, if you look at the Avalon speakers.
Yes, Avalon,
right?
kind of
That's
innovative.
The obvious,
yeah, the innovators of that. Yeah,
feature of that.
Yeah.
So, and there's been lots of other people do it. They're the ones I pinpointed. Oh yeah, that's definitively Avalon. And so I thought I'd give it a go, and I mocked things up, and it seemed to be working. So that's the shape we came up with. And the mid-century vibe, simply by putting the picture frame around, you go, oh, that's mid-century.
Yeah.
Now, if you do it on a flat baffle and it's protruding forward, that
changes
messes
it.
up the diffraction. But once it's set back, it has only a small effect. And by sculpting the baffle, that needs to be 2-inch thick. So it makes a very strong...
2 inches thick is pretty strong. Yeah, that's serious.
And then the rest of the cabinet, because it's a large cabinet, again, you've got to make it strong. So all the panels are 1 inch thick, top, sides, back. And then there's 2 vertical braces, and you can see it in the picture out there, 2 vertical braces running top to bottom, side to side. So very strong cabinet. And it's a vented system. 2 vents.
And I noticed even a curvature on the side. Is that right?
There's a straight
slight-
section and then a break point, and then it goes back.
Yeah, okay.
3 degrees. And
3 degrees. Yeah, I
it's
could
subtle,
barely tell that.
but
Yeah.
once you notice it,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
cool. It's more obvious with the walnut version because the
Okay.
grain runs front to back in
Okay.
lines, so you can see that it comes in.
It is cool. Yeah.
But
Subtle.
the other factor about that is, given it's a two-way concentric, the dispersion pattern is identical in pretty much every direction,
Really.
which means you can put it on its side.
Make
So
it a
it's
center
perfect
channel. Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
especially, it's 91 dB efficiency,
Wow.
or sensitivity, I should say, and a true 8-ohm impedance. It's
Okay.
a minimum of 6.4 at about 150 hertz, but the rest of the range, it's above 7-8 ohms. And so very easy to drive. So perfect for home theatre in that sense.
Yeah,
because
you could have identical
sensitivity
centers
can go
and
loud,
yeah.
but identical centers. So, but what happens when you put it on its side? The tweeter is effectively 4 inches lower. You know, the difference between that and that distance.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I've done, this is a custom stand. This is our stand that will be released soon. I've built this platform that screws to the top that now cradles the speaker when it's on its side because of this angle.
Okay.
And so 2 of the inches height differences accommodated by this platform to the speaker. And then the other factor is once it's tilted at 3 degrees, the axis is back at typical distance, back to where it would have been with this.
Interesting.
So it makes it very easy.
So there's a lot. That's just fascinating because a lot of people just say, "Oh, it's another box speaker," but there's a lot of R&D that went into it, like you just described. What was the time frame from when you started to finish? About
18 months. I've
18
been
months.
with,
Okay.
MoFi nearly 2 years in January.
Okay.
And that involves setting up new facilities in Southern California.
Because there was nothing existing to do it.
Right, I mean, MoFi Electronics have facilities for manufacturing because they do the turntables and some of the electronics. But I wasn't about to also set up speaker manufacturing yet. That would have been delayed production of anything for a long time.
For prototypes, yeah.
Yeah. So I've got a facility in Southern California.
Okay.
Beverly Hills, I managed.
Oh, nice. Okay.
90211. I call it
Oh,
one better than
one better?
90210.
Yeah, I just was down in that area. Yeah.
And so 1,600 square feet, and it's
Oh, nice.
got a lab area, a measuring area, a big listening room, 20 by
Really?
30 by 11 foot high, which I've set up so that it doesn't really look like you put room treatment in. I didn't want anyone to walk into a space with parallel walls and these warts.
Right. The stereotypical
panels.
stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to feel like you're at home. So I've got this huge sectional sofa in the middle of the room,
Okay.
which was the first thing I put in, and it just sucks energy out of the room, so that's great.
One of the best room treatments. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the only thing that looks like room treatment, I've got some ceiling clouds, these wavy things, but the rest of it looks like wall paneling, and
That's cool.
even the pictures at the front of the room are actually my wife's paintings that I
Okay.
photographed, blew up onto printed on acoustic cloth, and they cover the window. So I packed the window recess with absorbent material.
Oh, really?
And then just stretched this cloth over a picture frame, put them on the wall. It looks
I'd love to see that,
wonderful,
yeah.
the absorbers.
Is that showroom open for somebody to visit?
Yeah.
Because I might be out there next week. So yeah.
All right, yeah, come
Yeah,
by.
I'd love to see that. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
No, this is amazing how much it goes into a speaker and you're explaining. People don't appreciate, that it's...
Well, the funny thing is, it looks so simple.
Yeah.
And on top of that, when I looked at all the different cone materials that's available to someone these days, the one that worked best to meet my objectives when you're talking about a 10-inch base mid is paper.
Paper.
Because obviously I had to tool up my own cone, but it's paper. So it keeps with the vintage vibe, but people look at it and go, paper cones?
Yeah, where's
why am I paying any money?
Where's the carbon fiber and all this other... Yeah, exactly.
You
Right.
can get too caught up in the technicality of the latest materials.
Yeah.
I'm not denying they have their purpose. Clearly, because I was using beryllium, and you can't get much more exotic or expensive
Sure.
than beryllium unless you say diamond.
Diamond and
But
yeah,
try making
plasma.
a
Yeah.
diamond-based
Right.
driver.
Yeah.
So it's what works best in particular circumstances.
Awesome, yeah. And the price point is amazing then based on what you're telling me now and all the work that went into it. Obviously to make these on their own, the parts cost and the drivers and all that, it's a relatively steal for that. But then when you realize the technology, kind of a one-of-kind design,
Well,
doing
when you
things.
think about the driver, for example, with everything I had to do to make that work, normally the single most expensive part of the speaker is the cabinet. And if you look at the construction of that cabinet, that's a lot of cabinet.
Sure.
But it's not the most expensive part.
The drivers.
The driving is the
Really?
most expensive part.
So that kind of
It's
turns things on its head because
Yes,
most
it
box
does.
speakers, it is the cabinet 100% of the time.
Yeah.
That's especially the mega dollar ones.
Yeah.
And even with exotic drivers, but you're getting the money is going into the driver.
Yes.
Which is great.
And I've always said to people, my design process is drivers first. You've got to fix the drivers, then the crossover, so you integrate them together properly. Of course, that's a lot easier when you're doing a concentric driver. But
There's no trade-off though with the cabinet. You got 2-inch thick walls and 1-inch thick rest. That's amazing. So I appreciate you going through that. I guess we got some people want to go ahead and listen next. So yeah, I guess we'll go do that next.
okay,
Thank you.
pleasure.